Hi, everybody, and welcome back. Today, I am joined by Sabine Horner, and Sabine is a nutritionist, an Ayurvedic health coach, and a grief yoga therapist. Welcome, Sabine.
Hey, thank you very much for inviting me today.
Well, it's
Yeah,
really a pleasure to meet you, and somebody kindly recommended your work as somebody who receives my newsletter. And unfortunately, all those wonderful people that introduced me to new speakers, I didn't ask for their names, so I can't personally say a thank you.
yeah.
But I'm really excited about this conversation around nutrition and Ayurvedic nutrition, because such a big part of consciously grieving, I believe, is around our self-care and how we are treating our bodies while we go through the very painful experience of grief. And so perhaps firstly, we can begin by you introducing yourself and how you came into doing what you do.
So I've always been interested in food and herbs. Actually, I always wanted to learn to cook with herbs more, but didn't feel confident at all. And then my husband was diagnosed with leukemia, and I knew that we had to do something about his and yeah, in first of all about his nutrition. I came second. And I already had this Ayurvedic cookbook standing on the kitchen top, and I'd ignored it, for years. I think it was just standing there, and I picked it back up again, and it also gave me all an explanation for his leukemia, about his imbalances and what had, contributed to his imbalances and causing the leukemia in the very end. So I picked it back up, and I tried to learn to cook in a more nourishing way, because I knew that all the chemotherapies he was going to go through were going to damage his gut. So I was very conscious of that, and just gradually I learned to cook in a more nutrient dense way. Every meal became just 100% full of nutrients. There was nothing. I didn't allow for anything like pasta to get in the way of this. I don't believe that pasta is very nourishing, not as nourishing as beans and lentils would be. So, yeah. So his diagnosis actually pushed me into doing more about my interest in food and nutrition and herbs. And yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you answered that question perfectly. Thank you. But unfortunately, Kevin didn't survive the leukemia. And so you were then left in acute grief as a widow. But you had these new tools of how to replenish your body. So
Yeah.
maybe just first of all, like for the people who are listening, how were you to begin with in your grief?
All over the place, as everybody would be. Wasn't really thinking of drinking. People put a cup of tea in front of me and I would just ignore it. At his funeral, I wasn't really drinking and eating either. It wasn't my main priority at all. I had a friend who stayed with me for 3 weeks. She cooked. I cooked my breakfast. I know that I stuck to cooking my breakfast, but the thing was that he had a different breakfast. So making my breakfast didn't trigger memories. I was just standing at the stove and I was missing him because he used to stand next to me, but I could carry on making my breakfast. I had problems with other things to carry on, other recipes and other dishes that we cooked together, but yeah, the breakfast was okay. So I did that myself. I remember that, but I don't remember anything we were eating for lunch or dinner. no recollection whatsoever about the first 1 or 2 months. And then I slowly started cooking again because my Ayurvedic doctor that we'd been seeing for Kevin's leukemia and my stress, helping him go through his treatments, he pushed me because I saw him again after Kevin died for treatments. And he said, you have to eat 3 healthy meals every day. He could just see that I was sliding into depression. And that was actually that wake-up call that I needed. So just a push in my proverbial butt. Yeah, we all need that, because it's so encompassing, this grief, and we're just in this cloud and not aware of what's going on in the body and around us. And it's really difficult. So it's very, very important to have somebody to take care, look after you in the first few weeks and months, and then just gradually, take step by step, lead you into, cooking more. But that's why I want to support bereaved people, because I've been there myself. I know how difficult it is, but I also know how important it is. And the sooner we can get into a more regular daily meal routine, the better we are going to cope with our grief.
Absolutely. And maybe for the people who've never heard this word Ayurveda before, you could explain what that is and where it comes from.
So Ayurveda is one of the world's oldest medical systems. You could compare it with traditional Chinese medicine that's more well known. Ayurveda luckily survived the British occupation of India. It was actually forbidden to practice Ayurveda during those 80 years. So luckily the knowledge survived and it's now spreading again around the world. And it's a very, very, if you compare it to Western medicine, it's a more holistic system of medicine. It goes much deeper. It distinguishes between 3 different body types and types in between. So there's actually 7 different body types. If you take the 3 and think of, one person could be just 100%, there's Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and one person could be just 100% Vata or nearly 100% Kapha or Pitta. And then we could also be 50-50, sort of 50-50 ratio between the 3, or just all 3. And actually, most balanced persons are the ones that have all 3 doshas, these primal energies, in a sort of 30-30-30 ratio. So it's not so easy to get them out of balance, and they find it easier to get back into balance because of the more balanced ratio of these 3 fundamental energies in their body. So that also determines how we respond to grief, how we respond to this emotional stress response that we undergo and experience. So if you are 100% Vata, for example, which is a lot of wind energy, and stress is also wind energy, then you're going to have a lot of being up there, having a lot of mobile energy in your body, not being grounded at all, less grounded even than other people. So you really need to work more on grounding yourself than, for example, a Kapha person who has got a lot of earth energy, has got this heavy energy, the stable energy. Like I'm half and half earth and fire energy. So you can feel the fire in my head, and I'm more like the heavy energy in my body. And so when you are already having this heavy energy, you are already better grounded. So my Ayurvedic doctor also said, I'm really fortunate to have this Kapha constitution, to have all this heavy energy, because it just makes it easier for me to cope with grief. And I really, I can just agree with him. Yeah, it makes such a difference to So it's just so important to know your constitution, and Ayurveda tells you how to find out about this. And if do it, you can do a dosha quiz online, but most of them lead you astray, because when you're grieving and you have all this vata energy, the surplus vata energy or excess vata energy, then it's, you could, I did one of these quizzes, and according to this quiz, I was vata in my constitution. I'm not vata in my constitution. So you really have to be careful where you do this quiz, on which website. It has to be a renowned Ayurvedic practitioner doctor that offers you that quiz, and not just anybody. So you can really, get the wrong picture about yourself. So, and once you know your original constitution, like me, I'm Kapha Pitta or Pitta Kapha, debatable. And then you know the root cause of your imbalance is too much vata energy, too much mobile energy, then you can work on this to get your body back into balance. So that's what Ayurveda is all about preventing your grief symptoms, because, this vata energy causes a lot of grief symptoms. It pushes all the other two doshas out of balance, because it's the mobile, the wind energy that pushes, that is important for regulating transport in the body, communication, and also movement, right? So we couldn't move without this energy. So it's really important to prevent these grief symptoms to get out of balance. And that's also what I want to help people with, to understand where their grief symptoms are coming from, and to do something to address them, so that they don't end up in, being diagnosed with a serious disease. Like my husband, he lost his first wife, and then 10 years later, 7 years later, he got lymphoma. And then 10 years later or so, he was diagnosed with leukemia. And it's all, you can follow the triggers in his life to, where he ended up with leukemia. And that's not just Ayurveda, that's also Western nutrition. Also looks at your timing. Your grief symptoms or your diseases, they don't come out of the blue. And when Kevin was diagnosed with leukemia, his consultant said, it's poor luck. No, it's not. Everything led to his diagnosis. He was overworking. He was not sleeping enough. He's not eating enough, not drinking enough. So it didn't come out of the blue. He just thought he was healthy and fit, or fit and healthy, and he could push himself to the limit. And no, at some point, your body is going to stop you.
Yeah.
And the only thing that could stop him was leukemia. Infections or anything else didn't do it. So,
it's definitely a massive, topic. And I love this idea, that food and nutrition is really medicine. And I relate very much to what you're saying about Kevin, and also actually with how my mother didn't grieve consciously after my father died. And she threw herself into work and a new relationship, and that didn't end up working out. So she ended up going through a divorce, and then there was many other losses in the sort of 11 years after my father died, and then she got breast cancer. And I also had thought a lot about that, and how she didn't really nurture herself and grieve consciously, which is, very much a big inspiration for what I do now. And sometimes I sort of say to people who do my groups, if there's one thing that grief can teach you or encourage you to do, if you haven't done already, is to develop a self-care practice. And self-care can come in so many different ways, shapes, or form. And I know that you also teach yoga as well. And so maybe you could share a little bit about your other tools that you've used during grieving and that you also teach.
Yeah. So apart from trying to get back into regular daily meal routine, I had Kundalini yoga. And it doesn't matter which type of yoga you do. The main thing is that you do the breathing. I mean, breathing is so basic. We do it subconsciously all the time, but we need to do it more consciously when we're grieving, because you may remember from when you grieved your mother that this tightness in your chest, it just prevents us from really breathing deeply into our tummy. And at first we just have to maybe, like, force is not the right word, but more have to make more effort into pushing the breath deeper, because it's just like everything's just stuck here. But the more we do it, the easier it becomes, of course. And breathing deep into our belly on the inhale is just, the right way of breathing is also something that people get wrong. I know that before I started, doing the yoga training, I breathed the wrong way. So there's no, everybody who's got the problem with breathing not properly, it's just in good company. So sometime in our lives, we learn to breathe the other way, pushing the tummy in on the inhale and then pushing it out on the exhale. It's just funny. And it's all related to stress, of course. It's only stress that can make us do things in an unnatural way. So apart from breathing, what helped me was also like meditation that was given to me by one of my teachers, which is the meditation for the negative mind. And it encourages you to let anything come up that's, like in any way so-called negative, like negative thoughts, emotions, and feelings, and then to release them with your breath on your exhale. And that was so powerful and helped me sleep. And that's, of course, one of the things that we can't do properly anymore. We don't find this stressful sleep anymore because our brain is just on overload, and all the stress response, all the cortisol racing through our body is just not conducive to a restful night's sleep. So meditation, although people just like dread the word meditation, a lot of people don't want to go there. But there's a misconception about meditation that we already have to know how to sit still and calm our mind. But meditation is about learning to do this. So when your mind is just racing all the time, then I would encourage you to really find a place to just sit still and to just learn to observe these racing thoughts. And don't be discouraged that you can't still them, because it takes years and years of practice to still your thoughts and your mind. I'm still practicing every day myself, and I'm sure you do. What's your experience about meditation?
Well, yeah, I think, as you say, it's not that we should be able to sit there and our mind is empty. That's, we may get a few seconds or a minute of that at one point when we're very far down the line. And I think what you say, people hear the word meditation and dread it. And there is some sort of, resistance in us, especially in our busy lives, just to sit still and be with ourselves and our thoughts. But it's also, meditation can be dancing. It could be cooking,
Yeah, cooking, steering a ladle.
Yeah. So there's so many, it doesn't just have to be sitting cross-legged in silence. That is, there are many ways we can meditate, but we're so addicted to our phones, of course, and stimulation, that I think it's becoming more and more important to have these meditative practices, because even things like people are not walking, people are not cooking, people are not dancing, you know what I mean? It's like everybody's sort of
being still and watching television. Yeah.
so it's kind of scary. And I think meditation is so nourishing for us to just to be with ourselves and not to always need to be distracted.
Yeah, but it can, of course, be scary. I remember the silence, this overwhelming silence in the house, of course, because Kevin was no longer there. And I was afraid of the silence until I faced my fear of the silence. And I just sat there and I just like sat within this silence with the silence. And then the fear went away. Do you know what I mean? So, and actually in this silence, we can still feel them around much better than when we distract ourselves. And they are definitely still around, especially in the first year. They just make sure that we are fine. And I hear so many stories of other bereaved partners. As, you know, we have our own spirituality group in Widowed and Young. And so we share these experiences. And it's not just me who could, somehow feel him around. Even, like making me, whenever I started crying, making me spill a cup of tea so that I had to, stop crying and clean up. And I knew it was him. I just knew it was just like he didn't want me to cry. Yeah, it was very special. So don't be afraid of silence and trying to find this moment of stillness. And it also, of course, reduces our stress. So it helps us digest our food better. It helps us sleep better. It helps in so many ways with our emotional well-being. And again, to cope better with grief. And the better we breathe, the more we can find the stillness and empty the rubbish bin of our mind as well, of all the regrets and guilt and shame and whatever goes on, anger, frustration, the what ifs, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking, for the people who are listening, like there might be some people, as you said, you were not interested in food, and at the beginning when you're in acute stages of grief. For those people, what kind of foods would you kind of recommend that are sort of quite easy to eat, maybe, and tasty?
Yeah, the very first tip I would say and give is eat only warm food. Anything that's cold needs to be cooked in the stomach, so it costs more energy. And one thing we don't have when we're grieving is energy. So make sure it's warm food, or that if you have a sandwich, which is very difficult to digest, actually have it with something warm, like a warm bowl of soup. And make sure the bread is toasted, because again, it changes the molecular structure and makes it into something more nourishing for our beneficial gut bacteria. And they're very important for us when we're grieving, because they make about 95% of our serotonin. So toasting your bread is a tiny step, but a very important one. Eating a bowl of cereal, if possible, without the added sugars, with warm milk. Okay. And instead of milk, maybe have almond milk, which is rich in magnesium. So it's these tiny steps you can take, and then have some soups with some protein, like lentils, red lentils, brown lentils, green lentils. There's so many lentils, and if you can't make it, then ask somebody to maybe help you make it, or make it for you at first. I've got an ebook with some easy recipes that you can download from my website, and it also tells you all the wholesome foods that you can buy and get in, because we can't cook actually when we haven't got the food in. any nourishing food in that we can cook with, like vegetables. Any vegetables you can cook with. Doesn't matter. Yeah, I've learned to cook with any type of vegetable, and I used to be like, what do I do with the fennel? I don't know. What do I do with the chicory? I don't know. And now I just know what to do with them.
That's
So
brilliant.
again, but it's step by step, of course.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. And it's very, very interesting what you were sharing about the warm foods and how it takes our body less time to break those down. Then there's going to be people who are emotional eating and finding it really hard to curb cravings or binge eating, which was much more my experience actually. So, how would you, what kind of advice or tips would you give to people who are in that extreme?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would say don't feel ashamed of binge eating or eating too much, because it's natural. Food gives us comfort, right? And just bring more awareness into what and why you're eating. That's my first step. Awareness is always key. If you're not aware of what you're doing, that you're eating like every half an hour, then you can't really change much. And then once you are aware of how much you're eating and what you're eating, maybe then bring your also awareness into why you're eating. Find the emotions behind what you're eating. Is it stress? Is it grief? Is it anger? It can be anything when we're grieving, right? It doesn't have to be just grief. Yeah. But of course, it will be the overriding emotion initially. But later on, it could be other things like guilt or regret or just comfort, So, and then the third step is to find alternative ways of coping with these emotions. Like if you're craving comfort, maybe make yourself a hot chocolate drink with cocoa powder, not the ones that you buy in the supermarket with sugar. And sit on the sofa with a blanket, wrap yourself in a blanket and just give yourself comfort that way. Or if you're having lack of joy, and a lot of people start drinking coffee, and I was the same, like it gave me joy, but try to find other ways of getting more joy into your life again, like meeting people or go dancing, if that's one of the things that you would like to do. Get more movement into your body would also be good, because movement moves emotions, right? And the emotions need to move. Anything, go for a walk, distract yourself. Distraction is always good, and have the distraction ready next to the fridge if possible, like a tea bag. You can easily grab the distraction rather than the food, or a book, reading a book. Just distract yourself for 7 or 8 minutes, and then usually you're fine after that. There's a lot of ways, but it's just getting to know your own triggers and your own coping strategies, because they're different for everybody. I can only make suggestions, but it's trial and error.
Yeah, and I love the way that you started answering that question about not having, the shame around our behavior around food, and yeah, it can be a very, very difficult thing to talk about and to share about, and like you say, just normalizing that it is very normal for us to have these struggles and behaviors. So yeah, thank you for that. And I always like to ask people, at the end of the interviews, like, how would you define conscious grieving?
Well, for me, it's not pushing it away, not suppressing it, but actually living it. I would say sit with it, sit with yourself and your grief, and feel these emotions. and let them come up, and do something actively with it. And grief is also a good teacher. I know that some people don't like, that we are also learning something from grief, but we do. Grief is an enormous teacher. I've learned so much from my grief, and I'm still learning so much about myself, especially. I don't know. It's amazing what I've learned about myself in the last 6 years. So I would say wrap yourself in your grief and live it and embrace it. Yes, that's the word I was looking for. Embrace it in with every cell of your being, and just give yourself also the time to process everything that grief brings up. It's not only, the grief, the loss, the immediate loss that you're grieving, but grief also brings up, like David Kessler says, all the other things that we always pushed away, from our childhood. And they can be brought up as well. All these negative thoughts and feelings, but also trauma, and it's a really an opportunity to process everything and to just start life again with a clean slate, or a cleaner slate. I don't think we can, wipe everything off our slates, but we can do a lot of conscious work, and breathing can help with that. Conscious breathing to consciously grieve. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Sabina. It's beautiful. And lastly, for people who would like to stay in touch with you, you have a free gift. So perhaps you could just tell us about that.
Yeah, so when you go to my website, there is a box where you can put in your name and your email, and you get my ebook, a free ebook about the 3 simple self-care practices that you can start with when you are grieving, because we are so overwhelmed, and it may be so difficult for you to know where to start with getting your health back, because grief does impact our health and well-being. And I found that these 3 simple practices, like breathing and drinking enough and using color in everything we cook, can really be a good start, or can be a good starting point. And then we can take the next step. So you can download it from my website, and you will get 5 nourishing emails, one after the other. I think one every week, with tips about how to just to become aware of your breath, and then what you could do, and the simple breathing exercise that you can do to also cope better with grief in public, and the Tonglen practice. And it gives you other links as well to other free resources. So it's not just, giving you the ebook with the 3 self-care practices and then leaving you on your own. No, you get these emails to just help you put them into and incorporate them into your daily routine. So.
Well, that sounds so supportive. And we'll have a link to that underneath this interview as well.
Thank you.
Is there any last thing that you would like to add before we finish?
I'm just very much getting into habit change. That's, when we're grieving, our habits change. That's just a given. But I'm also wanting to support people with making changes that are actually going to support them, rather than make grieving even more difficult. So if you follow me on Instagram and Facebook and maybe LinkedIn, then you can, and YouTube, I've also got my own YouTube channel, then you can find videos on habit change and helpful things. And also on my website, that can help you make more positive changes during your grieving journey to just make you cope better with grief. And I know there's so many things that can help us. Grief is challenging and overwhelming, and it is very, very hard and a tough journey, but we can actually make it more difficult for us and really suffer when we don't look after ourselves or don't know how to look after ourselves. And I'm just there to support everybody who's struggling with that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sabina. It's been really, really fascinating hearing about your work, and it's just all so beneficial, you know, diet, nutrition, and self-care. So thank you very, very much for the work that you do, and thank you to everybody who's been listening.
Well, thank you again for inviting me, and I hope I'm going to, I've shared enough inspiring tips here during this interview. Thank you.
Be so helpful for people. So thank you very, very much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.